Now reading Victorian Short Stories, Stories of Courtship by W.S. William Schwenk Gilbert, a public domain text. A stampede of huddled sheep, wildly scampering over the slaty shingle, emerged from the leaden mist that muffled the fell-top, and a shrill shepherd's whistle broke the damp stillness of the air. And presently a man's figure appeared, following the sheep down the hillside. He halted a moment to whistle curtly to his two dogs, who, laying back their ears, chased the sheep at top speed beyond the brow. Then, his hands deep in his pockets, he strode vigorously forward. A streak of white smoke from a toiling train was creeping silently across the distance. The great, grey, desolate undulations of treeless country showed no other sign of life. The sheep hurried in single file along a tiny track worn threadbare amid the brown, lumpy grass, and, as the man came round the mountain's shoulder, a narrow valley opened out beneath him, a scanty patchwork of green fields, and, here and there, a whitewashed farm flanked by a dark cluster of sheltering trees. The man walked with a loose, swinging gait. His figure was spare and angular. He wore a battered, black felt hat and clumsy, iron-bound boots. His clothes were dingy from long exposure to the weather. He had close-set, insignificant eyes, much wrinkled, and stubbly eyebrows streaked with grey. His mouth was close-shaven and drawn by his abstraction into hard and taciturn lines. Beneath his chin bristled an unkempt fringe of sandy-coloured hair. When he reached the foot of the fell, the twilight was already blurring the distance. The sheep scurried, with a noisy rustling, across a flat, swampy stretch, overgrown with rushes, while the dogs headed them towards a gap in a low, ragged wall built of loosely heaped boulders. The man swung the gate to after them and waited, whistling peremptorily, recalling the dogs. A moment later, the animals reappeared, cringing as they crawled through the bars of the gate. He kicked out at them contemptuously, and mounting a stone stile a few yards further up the road, dropped into a narrow lane. Presently, as he passed a row of lighted windows, he heard a voice call to him. He stopped, and perceived a crooked, white-bearded figure wearing clerical clothes standing in the garden gateway. "Good evening, Anthony. A raw evening, this." "Eh, Mr. Blencarn, it is a bit frittish," he answered. "I've just been getting a few lambs off to fell." "I hope you're keeping fairly, and Miss Rosa too." He spoke briefly, with a loud, spontaneous cordiality. "Thank ye, Anthony, thank ye. Rosa's down at the church, playing over the hymns for tomorrow." "How's Mrs. Garstin?" "Nicely, thank ye, Mr. Blencarn. She's wonderful active, is mother." "Well, good night to ye, Anthony," said the old man, clicking the gate. "Good night, Mr. Blencarn," he called back. A few minutes later, the twinkling lights of the village came in sight, and from within the sombre form of the square-towered church, looming by the roadside, the slow, solemn strains of the organ floated out on the evening air. Anthony lightened his tread, then paused, listening, but presently, becoming aware that a man stood, listening also, on the bridge some few yards distant, he moved forward again. Slackening his pace, as he approached, he eyed the figure keenly, but the man paid no heed to him, remaining, with his back turned, gazing over the parapet into the dark, gurgling stream. Anthony trudged along the empty village street, past the gleaming squares of ruddy gold, starting on either side out of the darkness. Now and then he looked furtively backwards. The straight open road lay behind him, glimmering wanly. The organ seemed to have ceased. The figure on the bridge had left the parapet and appeared to be moving away towards the church. Anthony halted, watching it till it had disappeared into the blackness beneath the churchyard trees. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he left the road and mounted an upland meadow towards his mother's farm. It was a bare, oblong house. In front, a whitewashed porch and a narrow garden plot, enclosed by a low iron railing, were dimly discernible. Behind, the steep fell side loomed like a monstrous, mysterious curtain hung across the night. He passed round the back into the twilight of a wide yard, cobbled and partially grass-grown, vaguely flanked by the shadowy outlines of long, low farm buildings. All was wrapped in darkness. Somewhere overhead a bat fluttered, darting its puny scream. Inside, a blazing peat fire scattered capering shadows across the smooth stone floor, flickered among the dim rows of hams suspended from the ceiling, and on the panelled cupboards of dark, glistening oak. A servant girl, spreading the cloth for supper, clattered her clogs in and out of the kitchen. Old Mrs. Garstin was stooping before the hearth, tremulously turning some girdle cakes that lay roasting in the embers. At the sound of Anthony's heavy tread in the passage, she rose, glancing sharply at the clock above the chimney-piece. She was a heavy-built woman, upright, stalwart almost, despite her years. Her face was gaunt and sallow, deep wrinkles accentuated the hardness of her features. She wore a black widow's cap above her iron-grey hair, gold-rimmed spectacles, and a soiled checkered apron. "Ye vara late, Tony," she remarked querulously. He unloosened his woolen neckerchief, and when he had hung it methodically with his hat behind the door, answered, "'Twas terrible thick onto Felltop, and them two bitches be that senseless." She caught his sleeve, and, through her spectacles, suspiciously scrutinised his face. "Ye did na meet wi Rosa Blencarn?" "Nay, she was in church, hymn-playing, wi Luke stock hanging round door," he retorted bitterly, rebuffing her with rough impatience. She moved away, nodding sententiously to herself. They began supper, neither spoke. Anthony sat slowly, stirring his tea, and staring moodily into the flames. The bacon on his plate lay untouched. From time to time his mother, laying down her knife and fork, looked across at him in unconcealed asperity, pursing her wide, ungainly mouth. At last, abruptly setting down her cup, she broke out, "I wonder ye havena mair pride, Tony. For hoo lang are ye going to continue setting mopping and brooding like a sick sheep? You'll just make yourself ill, and then I reckon what you'll prove satisfied. But I wonder ye have no more pride." But he made no answer, remaining unmoved, as if he had not heard. Presently, half to himself, without raising his eyes, he murmured, "Luke be going south Monday." "Well, ye canna take oot was his leavings anyways. It hasna coom that, has it? Ye don't intend setting old T. Parish a-laughing at ye a second occasion?" He flushed dully, and bending over his plate, mechanically began his supper. "Why, dang it," he broke out a minute later. "Do you think I heed the cackling of 50 parishes? Nah, not I." And with a short, grim laugh, he brought his fist down heavily on the oak table. "You're daft, Tony," the old woman blurted. "Daft or na daft, I tell ye this, mother, that I be 46 year o' age this back end, and there be some things I will na listen to. Rosa Blencarn's bonny enough for me. Bonny enough, I've na patience wi' ye. Bonny enough, tricked oot in her furbelows, gallivanting wi every roister fra Perth. Bonny enough, that be all ye think on. She's been a proper parson's niece, the giddy, feckless creature, and she'd make ye a proper sort o' wife, Tony Garstin, ye great, fond booby." She pushed back her chair, and, hurriedly clattering the crockery, began to clear away the supper. "To whose be mine, to Lord be praised," she continued in a loud, hard voice. "And as long as he spare me, Tony, I'll na see Rosa Blencarn set foot inside it." Anthony scowled, without replying, and drew his chair to the hearth. His mother bustled about the room behind him. After a while she asked, "Did ye pen to lambs into Backfield?" "Nah, they're in Hallam Bottom," he answered curtly. The door closed behind her, and by he could hear her moving overhead. Meditatively blinking, he filled his pipe clumsily, and pulling a crumpled newspaper from his pocket, sat on over the smouldering fire, reading and stolidly puffing. The music rolled through the dark, empty church. The last leaden flicker of daylight glimmered in through the pointed windows, and beyond the level rows of dusky pews tenanted only by a litter of prayer. Books, 2 guttering candles revealed the organ pipes and the young girl's swaying figure. She played vigorously. Once or twice the tune stumbled, and she recovered it impatiently, bending over the keyboard, showily flourishing her wrists as she touched the stops. She was bareheaded. Her hat and cloak lay beside her on a stool. She had fair, fluffy hair, cut short behind her neck, large, round eyes, heightened by a fringe of dark lashes, rough, ruddy cheeks, and a rosy, full-lipped, unstable mouth. She was dressed quite simply, in a black, close-fitting bodice, a little frayed at the sleeves. Her hands and neck were coarsely fashioned. Her comeliness was brawny, literal, unfinished, as it were. When at last the ponderous chords of the Amen faded slowly into the twilight, flushed, breathing a little quickly, she paused, listening to the stillness of the church. Presently a small boy emerged from behind the organ. "Good evening, Miss Rosa," he called, trotting briskly away down the aisle. "And good night, Robert," she answered absently. After a while, with an impatient gesture, as if to shake some importunate thought from her mind, she rose abruptly, pinned on her hat, threw her cloak round her shoulders, blew out the candles, and groped her way through the church towards the half-open door. As she hurried along the narrow pathway that led across the churchyard, of a sudden a figure started out of the blackness. "Who's that?" she cried, in a loud, frightened voice. A man's uneasy laugh answered her. It's only me, Rosa. I didna think to scare ye. I'd been waiting for ye this whole past. She made no reply, but quickened her pace. He strode on beside her. I'm off, Monday, ye know, he continued. And, as she said nothing, will ye na stop just a minute? I'd like to speak a few words wi' ye before I go, and tomorrow I hev to get over to Scarsdale betimes, he persisted. I don't want to speak wi' ye, I don't want ever to see ye again. I just hate the sight o' ye. She spoke with a vehement, concentrated hoarseness. Nay, but ye must listen to me. I will na be put off wi' fratchin speeches. And gripping her arm, he forced her to stop. Loose me, ye great beast, she broke out. I'll nae hood ye if you'll just stand quiet like. I meant to speak fair to ye, Rosa. They stood at a bend in the road, face to face, quite close together. Behind his burly form stretched the dimness of a grey, ghostly field. What isn't ye hev to say to me? Hev done why it quick, she said sullenly. It be just this, Rosa, he began with dogged gravity. I want to tell ye that if any trouble comes to ye after I'm gone, ye know to what I refer. I want to tell ye that I'm prepared to act square by ye. I've written out on an envelope my address in London. Lukestock, care of Purcell & Co., Smithfield Market, London. You're a bad, sinful man. I just hate to sad o' ye. I wish ye were dead. But I reckon what ye'd ha' best thought o' that before. Ye've changed your whistle considerably since Tuesday. Nay, hood on, he added, as she struggled to push past him. Here's t'envelope. She snatched the paper and tore it passionately, scattering the fragments onto the road. When she had finished, he burst out angrily, Ye cussed unreasonable fool! Let me pass if ye've not mair tay, she cried. Nay, I'll na part wi' ye this fashion. Ye can speak soft enough when ye choose. And seizing her shoulders, he forced her backwards against the wall. Ye do look fine, and na mistake, when ye're just ablaze wi' ragin, he laughed bluntly, lowering his face to hers. Loose me, ye great coward, she gasped, striving to free her arms. Holding her fast, he expostulated. Coom, Rosa, can we na part friends? Part friends indeed, she retorted bitterly. Friends, why, the likes o' you. What d'ye take me for? Let me get home, I tell ye. And please, God, I'll never set eyes on ye again. I hate to sight o' ye. Be off wi' ye then, he answered, pushing her roughly back into the road. Be off wi' ye silly. Ye canna say, I have na spak fair to ye, an', by goom, ye'll na see me shallywallyin' this fashion agin. Be off wi' ye can just shift for yourself, since ye canna keep a civil tongue in your head. The girl, catching at her breath, stood as if dazed, watching his retreating figure, then starting forward at a run, disappeared up the hill into the darkness. Aye. Old Mr. Blencarn concluded his husky sermon. The scanty congregation, who had been sitting, stolidly immobile in their stiff Sunday clothes, shuffled to their feet, and the pewful of school children, in clamorous chorus, intoned the final hymn. Anthony stood near the organ, absently contemplating, while the rude melody resounded through the church, Rosa's deft manipulation of the keyboard. The rugged lines of his face were relaxed to a vacant, thoughtful limpness that aged his expression not a little, now and then, as if for reference, he glanced questioningly at the girl's profile. A few minutes later the service was over, and the congregation sauntered out down the aisle. A gawky group of men remained loitering by the church door. One of them called to Anthony. But, nodding curtly, he passed on and strode away down the road, across the grey upland meadows towards home. As soon as he had breasted the hill, however, and was no longer visible from below, he turned abruptly to the left, along a small, swampy hollow, till he had reached the lane that led down from the fell side. He clambered over a rugged, moss-grown wall, and stood, gazing expectantly down the dark, disused roadway. Then, after a moment's hesitation, perceiving nobody, seated himself beneath the wall, on a projecting slab of stone. Overhead hung a sombre, drifting sky. A gusty wind rollicked down from the fell, huge masses of chilly grey, stripped of the last night's mist. A few dead leaves fluttered over the stones, and from off the fell side there floated the plaintive, quavering rumour of many bleating sheep. Before long, he caught sight of two figures coming towards him, slowly climbing the hill. He sat awaiting their approach, fidgeting with his sandy beard and abstractedly grinding the ground beneath his heel. At the brow they halted. Plunging his hands deep into his pockets, he strolled sheepishly towards them. Ah, "Ah, good day to ye, Anthony," called the old man in a shrill, breathless voice. "'Tis a long hill, and my legs are not what they were. Time was when I'd think naught o' a whole day's tramp on T-fells. I'm gettin' feeble, Anthony, that's what 'tis. And if Rosa here wasn't the great strong lass she is, I don't know how her old uncle'd manage." And he turned to the girl with a proud, tremulous smile. "Will you take my arm a bit, Mr. Blencarn? Miss Rose'll be tired, likely?" Anthony asked. "Nay, Mr. Garstin, but I can manage nicely," the girl interrupted sharply. Anthony looked up at her as she spoke. She wore a straw hat trimmed with crimson velvet and a black, fur-edged cape that seemed to set off mightily the fine whiteness of her neck. Her large, dark eyes were fixed upon him. He shifted his feet uneasily and dropped his glance. She linked her uncle's arm in hers, and the three moved slowly forward. Old Mr. Blencarn walked with difficulty, pausing at intervals for breath. Anthony, his eyes bent on the ground, sauntered beside him, clumsily kicking at the cobbles that lay in his path. When they reached the vicarage gate, the old man asked him to come inside. "Not just now, thank ye, Mr. Blencarn. I've that lot of lambs to see to before dinner. It's a grand marnin' this," he added inconsequently. "Uncle's bought a nice lot of leghorns Tuesday," Rosa remarked. Anthony met her gaze. There was a grave, subdued expression on her face this morning that made her look more of a woman, less of a girl. Do ye show him the birds, Rosa? I'd be glad to have his opinion on 'em." The old man turned to hobble into the house, and Rosa, as she supported his arm, called back over her shoulder, "I'll not be a minute, Mr. Garstin." Anthony strolled round to the yard behind the house and waited, watching a flock of glossy white poultry that strutted, perkily pecking, over the grass-grown cobbles. Miss Rosa, they're a bonny lot," he remarked, as the girl joined him. "Are they not?" she rejoined, scattering a handful of corn before her. The birds scuttled across the yard with greedy, outstretched necks. The two stood, side by side, gazing at them. "What did he give for 'em?" Anthony asked. 55 shillings. He assented, nodding absently. "Was Dr. Sanderson na seen o' your father yesterday?" he asked after a moment. "He came in to forenoon. He said he was just no worse." "He nor, Miss Rosa, as I'm still thinking on ye," he began abruptly, without looking up. "I reckon it ain't much use," she answered shortly, scattering another handful of corn towards the birds. "I reckon I'll never marry. I'm just weary o' being courted." "I wouldna weary ye wi' courtin'," he interrupted. She laughed noisily. "Ye are a queer customer, and na mistake." "I'm a match for Luke Stock anyway," he continued fiercely. "Ye think naught o' taking oop wi' him, about as ranty, wild a young feller as ever stepped." The girl reddened and bit her lip. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Garstin. It seems to me you might hasty in jumping to conclusions." "Maybe I kin see a thing or two," he retorted doggedly. "Luke Stock's gone to London anyway. And a powerful good job too, in t'opinion of some folks." "You're jest jealous," she exclaimed with a forced titter. "You're jest jealous o' Luke Stock." "Nay, but ye need na fill your head wi' that nonsense. I'm too deep set on ye to feel jealousy," he answered gravely. The smile faded from her face as she murmured, "I canna make ye out, Mr. Garstin." "Nay, that ye canna. And I suppose it's natural, considering you're little more than a child, and I'm a'most old enough to be your father," he retorted, with blunt bitterness. "But ye know your mother's took that dislike to me. She'd never abide the sight of me at Hootsey." He remained silent a moment, moodily reflecting. "She'd jest heart git ower it." "I see naught in that objection," he declared. "Nay, Mr. Garstin, it canna be. Indeed, it canna be at all. You'd best just put it right from your mind, once and for all." "I'd just best put it off my mind, had I? Ye talk like a child," he burst out scornfully. "I intend ye to come to love me, and I will na tak ye till ye do. I'll just go on waiting for ye, and, mark my words, my day 'ull coom at last." He spoke loudly, in a slow, stubborn voice, and stepped suddenly towards her. With a faint, frightened cry, she shrank back into the doorway of the hen-house. "Ye talk like a prophet. Ye sort o' scare me." He laughed grimly and paused, reflectively scanning her face. He seemed about to continue in the same strain, but, instead, turned abruptly on his heel and strode away through the garden gate. Ive. For 300 years there had been a Garstin at Hootsey. Generation after generation had tramped the grey stretch of upland, in the springtime, scattering their flocks over the fell sides, and, at the back end, on dark winter afternoons, driving them home again, down the broad bridle path that led over the raise. They had been a race of few words, keeping themselves to themselves, as the phrase goes, beholden to no man, filled with a dogged, churlish pride, an upright, old-fashioned race, stubborn, long-lived, rude in speech, slow of resolve. Anthony had never seen his father, who had died one night, upon the fell top, he and his shepherd, engulfed in the great snowstorm of 1849. Folks had said that he was the only Garstin who had failed to make old man's bones. After his death, Jake Atkinson, from Ribblehead in Yorkshire, had come to live at Hootsey. Jake was a fine farmer, a canny bargainer, and very handy among the sheep, till he took to drink, and roystering every week with the town wenches up at Carlisle. He was a corpulent, deep-voiced, free-handed fellow. When his time came, though he died very hardly, he remained festive and convivial to the last. And for years afterwards in the valley, his memory lingered. Men spoke of him regretfully, recalling his quips, his feats of strength, and his choice breed of Herdwick rams. But he left behind him a host of debts up at Carlisle, in Penrith, and in almost every market town. Debts that he had long ago pretended to have paid with money that belonged to his sister. The widow Garstin sold the 12 Herdwicker rams and 9 acres of land. Within 6 weeks she had cleared off every penny, and for 13 months on Sundays wore her mourning with a mute, forbidding grimness, the bitter thought that, unbeknown to her, Jake had acted dishonestly in money matters, and that he had ended his days in riotous sin, soured her pride, imbued her with a rancorous hostility against all the world. For she was a very proud woman, independent, holding her head high, so folks said, like a Garstin bred and born, and Anthony, although some reckoned him quiet and of little account, came to take after her as he grew into manhood. She took into her own hands the management of the Hootsey farm, and set the boy to work for her along with the 2 farm servants. It was 25 years now since his Uncle Jake's death. There were grey hairs in his sandy beard, but he still worked for his mother, as he had done when a growing lad. And now that times were grown to be bad, of late years the price of stock had been steadily falling, and the hay harvests had drifted from bad to worse. The widow Garstin no longer kept any labouring men, but lived, she and her son, year in and year out, in a close parsimonious way. That had been Anthony Garstin's life, a dull, eventless sort of business, the sluggish incrustation of monotonous years. And until Rosa Blencarn had come to keep house for her uncle, he had never thought twice on a woman's face. The Garstins had always been good churchgoers, and Anthony, for years, had acted as churchwarden. It was one summer evening, up at the vicarage, whilst he was checking the offertory account, that he first set eyes upon her. She was fresh back from school at Leeds. She was dressed in a white dress. She looked, he thought, like a London lady. She stood by the window, tall and straight and queenly, dreamily gazing out into the summer twilight, whilst he and her uncle sat over their business. When he rose to go, she glanced at him with quick curiosity. He hurried away, muttering a sheepish good night. The next time that he saw her was in church on Sunday. He watched her shyly, with a hesitating, reverential discretion. Her beauty seemed to him wonderful, distant, enigmatic. In the afternoon, young Mrs. Forsyth from Longscale dropped in for a cup of tea with his mother, and the two set off gossiping of Rosa Blencarn, speaking of her freely, in tones of acrimonious contempt. For a long while he sat silent, puffing at his pipe, but at last, when his mother concluded with, "She looks to me fair stuck oop, full o' toonish airs and graces," despite himself, he burst out, "You're jest wasting your breath with that cackle. I reckon Miss Blencarn's o' a different clay to us folks." Young Mrs. Forsyth tittered immoderately, and the next week it was rumoured about the valley that Tony Garstin was gone loony over T. Parson's niece. But of all this he knew nothing, keeping to himself, as was his wont, and being, besides, very busy with the hay harvest, until one day, at dinner-time, Henry Sisson asked if he'd started his courting. Jacob Sowerby cried that Tony'd been too slow in getting to work, for that the girl had been seen spooning in Crosby Shaw's with Curbison the auctioneer, and the others, there were half a dozen of them lounging round the hay wagon, burst into a boisterous guffaw. Anthony flushed dully, looking hesitatingly from the one to the other, then slowly put down his beer, can, and of a sudden, seizing Jacob by the neck, swung him heavily on the grass. He fell against the wagon wheel, and when he rose the blood was streaming from an ugly cut in his forehead. And henceforward Tony Garstin's courtship was the common jest of all the parish. As yet, however, he had scarcely spoken to her, though twice he had passed her in the lane that led up to the vicarage. She had given him a frank, friendly smile, but he had not found the resolution to do more than lift his hat. He and Henry Sisson stacked the hay in the yard behind the house. There was no further mention made of Rosa Blencarn, but all day long Anthony, as he knelt thatching the rick, brooded over the strange sweetness of her face, and on the fell top, while he tramped after the ewes over the dry, crackling heather, and as he jogged along the narrow, rickety road, driving his cartload of lambs into the auction mart. Thus, as the weeks slipped by, he was content with blunt, wistful ruminations upon her indistinct image. Jacob Sowerby's accusation and several kindred innuendos let fall by his mother left him coolly incredulous. The girl still seemed to him altogether distant, but from the first sight of her face he had evolved a stolid, unfaltering conception of her difference from the ruck of her sex. But one evening, as he passed the vicarage on his way down from the fells, she called to him, and with a childish, confiding familiarity asked for advice concerning the feeding of the poultry. In his eagerness to answer her as best he could, he forgot his customary embarrassment and grew, for the moment, almost voluble and quite at his ease in her presence. Directly her flow of questions ceased, however, the returning perception of her rosy, hesitating smile, and of her large, deep eyes looking straight into his face, perturbed him strangely, and, reddening, he remembered the quarrel in the hayfield and the tale of Crosby Shaw's. After this, the poultry became a link between them, a link which he regarded in all seriousness, blindly unconscious that there was aught else to bring them together, only feeling himself in awe of her, because of her schooling, her townish manners, her ladylike mode of dress. And soon he came to take a sturdy, secret pride in her friendly familiarity towards him. Several times a week he would meet her in the lane, and they would loiter a moment together. She would admire his dogs, though he assured her earnestly that they were but sorry curs, and once, laughing at his staidness, she nicknamed him Mr. Churchwarden. That the girl was not liked in the valley he suspected, curtly attributing her unpopularity to the women's senseless jealousy. Of gossip concerning her he heard no further hint, but instinctively, and partly from that rugged, natural reserve of his, shrank from mentioning her name, even incidentally, to his mother. Now, on Sunday evenings, he often strolled up to the vicarage, each time quitting his mother with the same awkward affectation of casualness, and, on his return, becoming vaguely conscious of how she refrained from any comment on his absence, and appeared oddly oblivious of the existence of Parson Blencarn's niece. She had always been a sour-tongued woman, but as the days shortened with the approach of the long winter months, she seemed to him to grow more fretful than ever. At times it was almost as if she bore him some smouldering, sullen resentment. He was of stubborn fibre, however, toughened by long habit of a bleak, unruly climate. He revolved the matter in his mind deliberately, and when, at last, after much plodding thought, it dawned upon him that she resented his acquaintance with Rosa Blencarn, he accepted the solution with an unflinching phlegm, and merely shifted his attitude towards the girl, calculating each day the likelihood of his meeting her, and making, in her presence, persistent efforts to break down, once for all, the barrier of his own timidity. He was a man not to be clumsily driven, still less, so he prided himself, a man to be craftily led. It was close upon Christmas time before the crisis came. His mother was just home from Penrith Market. The spring cart stood in the yard. The old grey horse was steaming heavily in the still, frosty air. "I reckon you've come fast." "Toward horse is over hot," he remarked bluntly, as he went to the animal's head. She clambered down hastily, and, coming to his side, began breathlessly, "Ye ought he've come to market, Tony. There's been pretty goings on in Penrith today. I was helping Anna Forsyth choose 6 yards of sheeting in Dockroy when we sees Rosa Blencarn coom out o' T. Bell and Bullock in company wi' Curbison and young Joe Smethwick. Smethwick was fair reelin' drunk, and Curbison and T-girl were holding on to him to keep him fra falling, and then, after a bit, he puts his arm round the girl Tistedy hisself, and that fashion they goes off, right out T. Public Street." He continued to unload the packages, and to carry them mechanically one by one into the house. Each time, when he reappeared, she was standing by the steaming horse, busy with her tail. And on T road hame we passed T3 on 'em, in Curbison's trap, with Smethwick leaning T-bottom, singing maudlin songs. They were passing Dunscale village, aunt folks coom running out, a houses to see 'em go past. He led the cart away towards the stable, leaving her to cry the remainder after him across the yard. Half an hour later he came in for his dinner. During the meal not a word passed between them, and directly he had finished he strode out of the house. About 9 o'clock he returned, lit his pipe, and sat down to smoke it over the kitchen fire. "Where have you been, Tony?" she asked. Oop to vicarage, Courtin, he retorted defiantly, with his pipe in his mouth. This was 10 months ago, ever since he had been doggedly waiting. That evening he had set his mind on the girl, he intended to have her, and while his mother gibed, as she did now upon every opportunity, his patience remained grimly unflagging. She would remind him that the farm belonged to her, that he would have to wait till her death before he could bring the hussy to Hootsey. He would retort that as soon as the girl would have him, he intended taking a small holding over at Scarsdale. Then she would give way, and for a while piteously upbraid him with her old age, and with the memory of all the years she and he had spent together, and he would comfort her with a display of brusque, evasive remorse. But, none the less, on the morrow, his thoughts would return to dwell on the haunting vision of the girl's face, while his own rude, credulous chivalry, kindled by the recollection of her beauty, stifled his misgivings concerning her conduct. Meanwhile she dallied with him, and amused herself with the younger men. Her old uncle fell ill in the spring, and could scarcely leave the house. She declared that she found life in the valley intolerably dull, that she hated the quiet of the place, that she longed for Leeds and the exciting bustle of the streets. And in the evening she wrote long letters to the girl-friends she had left behind there, describing with petulant vivacity her tribe of rustic admirers. At the harvest time she went back on a fortnight's visit to friends. The evening before her departure she promised Anthony to give him her answer on her return. But, instead, she avoided him, pretended to have promised in jest, and took up with Lukestock, a cattle dealer from Wigton. It was 3 weeks since he had fetched his flock down from the fell. After dinner, he and his mother sat together in the parlour. They had done so every Sunday afternoon, year in and year out, as far back as he could remember. A row of mahogany chairs with shiny horsehair seats were ranged round the room. A great collection of agricultural prize tickets were pinned over the wall, and on a heavy, highly polished sideboard stood several silver cups. A heap of gilt-edged shavings filled the unused grate. There were gaudily tinted roses along the mantelpiece, and on a small table by the window, beneath a glass case, a gilt basket filled with imitation flowers. Every object was disposed with a scrupulous precision. The carpet and the red-patterned cloth on the centre table were much faded. The room was spotlessly clean, and wore, in the chilly winter sunlight, a rigid, comfortless air. Neither spoke or appeared conscious of the other's presence. Old Mrs. Garstin, wrapped in a woolen shawl, sat knitting. Anthony dozed fitfully on a stiff-backed chair. Of a sudden, in the distance, a bell started tolling. Anthony rubbed his eyes drowsily, and taking from the table his Sunday hat, strolled out across the dusky fields. Presently, reaching a rude wooden seat, built beside the bridle path, he sat down and relit his pipe. The air was very still. Below him, a white, filmy mist hung across the valley. The fell sides, vaguely grouped, resembled hulking masses of sombre shadow, and, as he looked back, 3 squares of glimmering gold revealed the lighted windows of the square-towered church. He sat smoking, pondering with placid and reverential contemplation on the mighty maker of the world, a world majestically and inevitably ordered, a world where, he argued, each object, each fissure in the fells, the winding course of each tumbling stream, possesses its mysterious purport, its inevitable signification. At the end of the field 2 rams were fighting, retreating, then running together, and, leaping from the ground, butting head to head and horn to horn. Anthony watched them absently, pursuing his rude meditations. And the succession of bad seasons, the slow ruination of the farmers throughout the country, were but punishment meted out for the accumulated wickedness of the world. In the olden time God rained plagues upon the land. Nowadays, in his wrath, he spoiled the produce of the earth, which with his own hands he had fashioned and bestowed upon men. He rose and continued his walk along the bridle path. A multitude of rabbits scuttled up the hill at his approach, and a great cloud of plovers, rising from the rushes, circled overhead, filling the air with a profusion of their querulous cries. All at once he heard a rattling of stones, and perceived a number of small pieces of shingle bounding in front of him down the grassy slope. A woman's figure was moving among the rocks above him. The next moment, by the trimming of crimson velvet on her hat, he had recognized her. He mounted the slope with springing strides, wondering the while how it was she came to be there, that she was not in church playing the organ at afternoon service. Before she was aware of his approach, he was beside her. "I thought you'd be in church," he began. She started then, gradually regaining her composure, answered, weakly smiling. "Mr. Jenkinson, the new schoolmaster, wanted to try the organ." He came towards her impulsively. She saw the odd flickers in his eyes as she stepped back in dismay. "Nay, but I will na harm ye," he said. "Only I reckon what 'tis a special turn of Providence meetin' wi' ye oop here. I reckon what you'll heave tea give me a square answer noo. Ye canna dilly-dally everlastingly." He spoke almost brutally, and she stood, white and gasping, staring at him with large, frightened eyes. The sheep walk was but a tiny thread-like track. The slope of the shingle on either side was very steep. Below them lay the valley, distant, lifeless, all blurred by the evening dusk. She looked about her helplessly for a means of escape. "Miss Rosa," he continued in a husky voice, "can ye na come to think on me? Think ye, I've been waiting nigh upon 2 year for ye. I've watched ye take oop, first with this young fella, and then with that, till sometimes my heart's fit to burst. Many a day, oop on fell, top, tea thought o' ye's nigh driven me daft, and I've left my shepherding just tea set on a cairn in tea mist, picturing and brooding on your face. Many an evening I've started. Oop tea vicarage, wee tea resolution tea speak right oot tea ye, but when it coom tea point, a sort o' timidity seemed tea hood me back. I was that feared tea displease ye. I know I'm na scholar, and mabbe ye think I'm rough-mannered. I know I've spoken sharply to ye once or twice lately. But it's just because I'm that mad why love for ye. I just canna help myself sometimes." He waited, peering into her face. She could see the beads of sweat above his bristling eyebrows. The damp had settled on his sandy beard. His horny fingers were twitching at the buttons of his black Sunday coat. She struggled to summon a smile, but her underlip quivered, and her large dark eyes filled slowly with tears. And he went on, "Ye've come to mean just everything to me. If ye will na hev me, I care for naught else. I canna speak to ye in phrases. I'm just a plain, unscholarly man. I canna wheedle ye. We cunnin' after to fashion a tune, folks. But I can love ye wi' all my might, and watch over ye, and work for ye better than any one o' 'em." She was crying to herself, silently, while he spoke. He noticed nothing, however. The twilight hid her face from him. "There's naught against me," he persisted. "I'm as good a man as any one on 'em." "Eh, as good a man as any one on 'em," he repeated defiantly, raising his voice. "It's impossible, Mr. Garstin, it's impossible. You've been very kind to me," she added, in a choking voice. "Wah, dang it, I didna mean to mak ye cry, lass," he exclaimed, with a softening of his tone. "There's naught for ye tea cry hour." She sank onto the stones, passionately sobbing in hysterical and defenceless despair. Anthony stood a moment, gazing at her in clumsy perplexity, then, coming close to her, put his hand on her shoulder and said gently, "Coom, lass, what's trouble? Ye can trust me." She shook her head faintly. But ye can, though," he asserted firmly. "Come, what is it?" Heedless of him, she continued to rock herself to and fro, crooning in her distress. "Oh, I wish I were dead. I wish I could die." "Wish ye could die," he repeated. "Why, whatever can't be, that's troubling ye like this. There, lassie, give o'er. It'll all coom right, whatever it be." "No, no," she wailed. "I wish I could die. I wish I could die." Lights were twinkling in the village below, and across the valley darkness was draping the hills. The girl lifted her face from her hands and looked up at him with a scared, bewildered expression. "I must go home, I must be getting home," she muttered. "Nay, but there's summat mighty amiss wi' ye." "No, it's nothing." "I don't know. I'm not well. I mean it's nothing. It'll pass over. You mustn't think anything of it." "Nay, but I canna stand by and see ye in sich trouble." "It's nothing, Mr. Garstin. Indeed it's nothing," she repeated. But I canna credit that," he objected stubbornly. She sent him a shifting, hunted glance. "Let me get home." "You must let me get home." She made a tremulous, pitiful attempt at firmness. Eyeing her keenly, he barred her path. She flushed scarlet and looked hastily away across the valley. "If ye'll tell me your distress, maybe I can help ye." No, it's nothing." "It's nothing. If ye'll tell me your distress, maybe I can help ye," he repeated with a solemn, deliberate sternness. She shivered and looked away again, vaguely, across the valley. "You can do nothing. There's naught to be done," she murmured drearily. "There's a man in this business," he declared. Let me go, she pleaded desperately. "Who isn't that's been putting ye into this distress?" His voice sounded loud and harsh. No one. I canna tell ye, Mr. Garstin. It's no one," she protested weakly. The white, twisted look on his face frightened her. "My God!" he burst out, gripping her wrist. "And a proper soft fool you've made o' me." "Who is it, I tell ye?" "Who's to men? You're hurtin' me. Let me go." "I canna tell ye, and you're fond o' him?" "No, no. He's a wicked, sinful man. I pray God I may never set eyes on him again. I told him so." "But ef he's got ye into trouble, he'll hev to marry ye," he persisted with a brutal bitterness. "I will not. I hate him," she cried fiercely. "But is he willin' to marry ye?" "I don't know. I don't care. He said so before he went away, but I'd kill myself sooner than live with him." He let her hands fall and stepped back from her. She could only see his figure, like a sombre cloud, standing before her. The whole fell side seemed still and dark and lonely. Presently she heard his voice again. "I reckon what there's one road to your distress." She shook her head drearily. "There's none. I'm a lost woman, and ef ye took me instead," he said eagerly. I don't understand. Ef he married me instead of Luke Stock? But that's impossible. The T-child. I know, but I'll take T-child as mine." She remained silent. After a moment he heard her voice answer in a queer, distant tone. "You mean that you're ready to marry me and adopt the child?" "I do," he answered doggedly. "But people, your mother? Folks all just know naught about it. It's none of their business. T-child all pass as mine." "You'll accept that?" "Yes," she answered in a low, rapid voice. "You'll consent to hev me if I get you oot o' your trouble?" "Yes," she repeated in the same tone. She heard him draw a long breath. "I said it was a turn of Providence, meetin' wi' you oop here," he exclaimed with half-suppressed exultation. Her teeth began to chatter a little. She felt that he was peering at her, curiously, through the darkness. "And noo," he continued briskly, "ye'd best be gettin' home. Give me your hand, and I'll stiddy ye our tinestones." He helped her down the bank of shingle, exclaiming, "By goom, you're stony cold." Once or twice she slipped. He supported her, roughly gripping her knuckles. The stones rolled down the steps, noisily, disappearing into the night. Presently they struck the turf bridle path, and, as they descended silently towards the lights of the village, he said gravely, "I always reckoned what my day I'd coom." She made no reply, and he added grimly, "There'll be terrible work wi' mother over this." He accompanied her down the narrow lane that led past her uncle's house. When the lighted windows came in sight, he halted. "Good night, lassie," he said kindly. "Do ye give our distress in yourself?" "Good night, Mr. Garstin," she answered, in the same low, rapid voice in which she had given him her answer up on the fell. "We're man and wife plighted now, are we not?" he blurted timidly. She held her face to his, and he kissed her on the cheek clumsily. Fear. The next morning the frost had set in. The sky was still clear and glittering. The whitened fields sparkled in the chilly sunlight. Here and there, on high, distant peaks, gleamed dainty caps of snow. All the week Anthony was to be busy at the fell-foot wall building against the coming of the winter storms. The work was heavy, for he was single-handed, and the stone had to be fetched from off the fell side. 2 or 3 times a day he led his rickety lumbering cart along the lane that passed the vicarage gate, pausing on each journey to glance furtively up at the windows. But he saw no sign of Rosa Blencarn, and, indeed, he felt no longing to see her. He was grimly exultant over the remembrance of his wooing of her, and over the knowledge that she was his. There glowed within him a stolid pride in himself. He thought of the others who had courted her, and the means by which he had won her seemed to him a fine stroke of cleverness. And so he refrained from any mention of the matter, relishing, as he worked, all alone, the days through, the consciousness of his secret triumph, and anticipating, with inward chucklings, the discomforted cackle of his mother's female friends. He foresaw without misgiving her bitter opposition. He felt himself strong, and his heart warm towards the girl. And when, at intervals, the brusque realization that, after all, he was to possess her swept over him, he gripped the stones and swung them almost fiercely into their places. All around him the white, empty fields seemed slumbering breathlessly. The stillness stiffened the leafless trees. The frosty air flicked his blood, singing vigorously to himself. He worked with a stubborn, unflagging resolution, methodically postponing, till the length of the wall should be completed, the announcement of his betrothal. After his reticent, solitary fashion, he was very happy, reviewing his future prospects with a plain and steady assurance, and, as the weekend approached, coming to ignore the irregularity of the whole business, almost to assume, in the exaltation of his pride, that he had won her honestly, and to discard, stolidly, all thought of Lukestock, of his relations with her, of the coming child that was to pass for his own. And there were moments, too, when, as he sauntered homewards through the dusk at the end of his day's work, his heart grew full to overflowing of a rugged, superstitious gratitude towards God in heaven who had granted his desires. About 3 o'clock on the Saturday afternoon he finished the length of wall. He went home, washed, shaved, put on his Sunday coat, and, avoiding the kitchen, where his mother sat knitting by the fireside, strode up to the vicarage. It was Rosa who opened the door to him. On recognizing him she started, and he followed her into the dining-room. He seated himself, and began, brusquely, "I've come, Miss Rosa. Speak Mr. Blencarn." Then added, eyeing her closely, "You're looking sick, lass." Her faint smile accentuated the worn, white look on her face. "I reckon you've been fretting yerself," he continued gently. "Lean awake o' nights, haven't ye, noo?" She smiled vaguely. "Well, but ye see I've come to settle toll business for ye. Ye thought mabbe that I was na a man o' my word." "No, no, not that," she protested. But what then?" "Ye must not do it, Mr. Garstin." "I must just bear my own trouble the best I can," she broke out. "My fancy I'm taking ye out of charity? Ye little reckon the sort o' stuff my love for ye's made of. Nay, Miss Rosa, but ye canna draw back noo. But ye cannot do it, Mr. Garstin. Ye know your mother will na have me at Hootsey. I could nae live there with your mother. I'd sooner bear my trouble alone as best I can. She's that stern as Mrs. Garstin. I couldn't look her in the face. I can go away somewhere. I could keep it all from uncle." Her colour came and went. She stood before him, looking away from him, dully, out of the window. "I intend ye tea, coom Tootsy. On the lad, I reckon I can choose my own wife. Mother'll heave ye at tea farm right enough. Ye needna distress yerself on that point. Nay, Mr. Garstin, but indeed she will not, never. I know she will not. She always set herself against me, right from the first." "Eh, but that was different." "T' case is all changed noo," he objected doggedly. "She'll support the sight of me all the less," the girl faltered. "Mother'll heave ye at Hootsey, receive ye willin' of her own free wish, d'ye hear? I'll answer for that." He struck the table with his fist heavily. His tone of determination awed her. She glanced at him hurriedly, struggling with her resolution. "I know who to manage mother. And now," he concluded, changing his tone, "is yer uncle about to place?" "He's up the paddock, I think," she answered. "Well, I'll just step oop and have a word wi' him." "Yeah?" "Ye willna tell him. Tut na harrowing tales, ye needna fear, lass. I reckon if I can tackle mother, I can accommodate myself to Parson Blencarn." He rose, and coming close to her, scanned her face. "Ye must get tae roses back to your cheeks," he exclaimed with a short laugh. "I canna be taking a ghost tea church." She smiled tremulously, and he continued, laying one hand affectionately on her shoulder. "Nay, but I was but jesting. Roses or na roses, ye'll be tied bonniest bride in all Cumberland. I'll meet ye in Hallam Lane after church time tomorrow," he added, moving towards the door. After he had gone, she hurried to the back door furtively. His retreating figure was already mounting the grey upland field. Presently, beyond him, she perceived her uncle, emerging through the paddock gate. She ran across the poultry yard, and mounting a tub, stood watching the two figures as they moved towards one another along the brow, Anthony vigorously trudging, with his hands thrust deep in his pockets. Her uncle, his wide-awake tilted over his nose, hobbling, and leaning stiffly on his pair of sticks. They met. She saw Anthony take her uncle's arm. The two, turning together, strolled away towards the fell. She went back into the house. Anthony's dog came towards her, slinking along the passage. She caught the animal's head in her hands and bent over it caressingly in an impulsive outburst of almost hysterical affection. Fiamby. The two men returned towards the vicarage. At the paddock gate they halted, and the old man concluded, "I could not have wished a better man for her, Anthony. Mabbe the Lord'll not be minded to spare me much longer. After I'm gone, Rose'll heave all I possess. She was my poor brother Isaac's only child. After her mother was taken, he, poor fellow, went altogether to the bad, and until she came here, she mostly lived among strangers. It's been a wretched sort of childhood for her, a wretched sort of childhood. You'll take care of her, Anthony, will you not? Nay, but I could not have wished for a better man for her, and there's my hand on. Thank ye, Mr. Blencarn, thank ye, Anthony, answered huskily, gripping the old man's hand. And he started off down the lane homewards. His heart was full of a strange, rugged exultation. He felt with a swelling pride that God had entrusted to him this great charge, to tend her, to make up to her, tenfold, for all that loving care which, in her childhood, she had never known. And together with a stubborn confidence in himself, there welled up within him a great pity for her, a tender pity, that, chastening with his passion, made her seem to him, as he brooded over that lonely childhood of hers, the more distinctly beautiful, the more profoundly precious. He pictured to himself, tremulously, almost incredulously, their married life. In the winter, his return home at nightfall to find her awaiting him with a glad, trustful smile, their evenings, passed together, sitting in silent happiness over the smouldering logs, or, in summer-time, the midday rest in the hayfields when, wearing perhaps a large-brimmed hat fastened with a red ribbon beneath her chin, he would catch sight of her, carrying his dinner, coming across the upland. She had not been brought up to be a farmer's wife. She was but a child still, as the old parson had said. She should not have to work as other men's wives worked. She should dress like a lady, and on Sundays, in church, wear fine bonnets, and remain, as she had always been, the belle of all the parish. And, meanwhile, he would farm as he had never farmed before, watching his opportunities, driving cunning bargains, spending nothing on himself, hoarding every penny that she might have what she wanted. And, as he strode through the village, he seemed to foresee a general brightening of prospects, a sobering of the fever of speculation in sheep, a cessation of the insensate glutting, year after year, of the great winter marts throughout the north, a slackening of the foreign competition followed by a steady revival of the price of fatted stocks, a period of prosperity in store for the farmer at last. And the future years appeared to open out before him, spread like a distant, glittering plain, across which he and she, hand in hand, were called to travel together. And then, suddenly, as his iron-bound boots clattered over the cobbled yard, he remembered, with brutal determination, his mother and the stormy struggle that awaited him. He waited till supper was over, till his mother had moved from the table to her place by the chimney-corner. For several minutes he remained debating with himself the best method of breaking the news to her. Of a sudden he glanced up at her. Her knitting had slipped onto her lap. She was sitting, bunched of a heap in her chair, nodding with sleep. By the flickering light of the wood fire, she looked worn and broken. He felt a twinge of clumsy compunction. And then he remembered the piteous, hunted look in the girl's eyes, and the old man's words when they had parted at the paddock gate. And he blurted out, "I do but what I'll have to marry, Rosa Blencarn after all." She started, and blinking her eyes, said, "I was just taking a wink asleep." "What wasn't ye was saying, Tony?" He hesitated a moment, puckering his forehead into coarse rugged lines and fidgeting noisily with his teacup. Presently he repeated, "I doot but what I'll have to marry Rosa Blencarn after all." She rose stiffly, and stepping down from the hearth came towards him. "Mabbe I did na hear ye right, Tony." She spoke hurriedly, and though she was quite close to him, steadying herself with one hand clutching the back of his chair, her voice sounded weak, distant almost. "Look oop at me! Look oop into my face!" she commanded fiercely. He obeyed sullenly. "Nu oot weeter. What's ye meanin', Tony?" "I mean what I say," he retorted doggedly, averting his gaze. "What do you mean by saying that you've got to marry her?" "I tell ye I mean what I say," he repeated dully. "Ye mean ye've been and put the girl in trouble?" He said nothing, but sat staring stupidly at the floor. "Look oop at me, and answer," she commanded, gripping his shoulder and shaking him. He raised his face slowly, and met her glance. "Eh, that's aboot it," he answered. "This'll na be truth." "It'll be just a piece of wanton trickery," she cried. "Nay, but is truth," he answered deliberately. "Ye will na swear it?" she persisted. "I see na necessity for swearing." "Then ye canna swear tit," she burst out triumphantly. He paused an instant, then said quietly, "Eh, but I'll swear tit easy enough. Fetch a book." She lifted the heavy, tattered Bible from the chimney-piece and placed it before him on the table. He laid his lumpish fist on it. "Say," she continued with a tense tremulousness, "say, I swear t'ye, mother, that 'tis truth, tool truth, and note but tea truth, s'help me God. I swear t'ye, mother, it's truth, tool truth, and nothing but tea truth, and nothing but truth. S'help me God," he repeated after her. "Kiss the book," she ordered. He lifted the Bible to his lips. As he replaced it on the table, he burst out into a short laugh. "Be ye satisfied noo?" She went back to the chimney corner without a word. The logs on the hearth hissed and crackled. Outside, amid the blackness, the wind was rising, hooting through the firs and past the windows. After a long while, he roused himself, and drawing his pipe from his pocket almost steadily, proceeded leisurely to pare in the palm of his hand a lump of black tobacco. "We'll be asked in church Sunday," he remarked bluntly. She made no answer. He looked across at her. Her mouth was drawn tight at the corners. Her face wore a queer, rigid aspect. She looked, he thought, like a figure of stone. "You're not feeling poorly, are you, mother?" he asked. She shook her head grimly, then, hobbling out into the room, began to speak in a shrill, tuneless voice. "You talked at one time of taking a farm over Scarsdale Way, but you'd best stop here. I'll no hinder ye. Ye can have tea large bedroom and tea front, and I'll move o'er to what used to be my brother Jake's room. Ye know I've never had no opinion of tea, girl, but I'll do what's right by her, if I break my sperrit in tea doing on't. I'll make to girl welcome here. I'll stand by her proper like, mebbe I'll finish by finding soon good in her. But from this day forward, Tony, ye're na son of mine. Ye've dishonoured yourself. Ye've laid a trap for me. Laid a trap, that's to word. Ye've brought shame and bitterness on your wood mother in her old age. Ye've made me despise to vara sector ye. Ye can stop on here, but ye shall niver touch a penny of my money. Every shilling of it shall go to your child, or to your child's children. She went on, raising her voice, you've got your way at last, and mebbe you reckon you've chosen a mighty smart way. But time 'ull coom when you'll regret this day, when ye eat oot your repentance in dust and ashes. Lord'll punish ye, Tony, chastise ye properly. You'll learn that marriage begun in sin can end in naught but sin. She concluded, as she reached the door, raising her skinny hand prophetically. After I'm deed and gone, ye mind your words at apostle, for them that have sinned without law shall also perish without law. And she slammed the door behind her. A Little Grey Glove by George Egerton, Mary Cheverley to Dunny Bright, Keynotes, London, Elkin Matthews and John Lane, Vigo Street, 1893, early spring, 1893. The Book of Life begins with a man and woman in a garden and ends with revelations. Oscar Wilde. Yes, most fellows' Book of Life may be said to begin at the chapter where woman comes in. Mine did. She came in years ago when I was a raw undergraduate. With the sober thought of retrospective analysis, I may say she was not all my fancy painted her. Indeed, now that I come to think of it, there was no fancy about the vermeil of her cheeks, rather an artificial reality. She had her bower in the bar of the Golden Boar, and I was madly in love with her, seriously intent on lawful wedlock. Luckily for me, she threw me over for a neighbouring pork butcher, but at the time I took it hardly, and it made me sex-shy. I was a very poor man in those days. One feels one's griefs more keenly then. One hasn't the wherewithal to buy distraction. Besides, ladies snubbed me rather, on the rare occasions I met them. Later I fell in for a legacy, the forerunner of several. Indeed, I may say I am beastly rich. My tastes are simple too, and I haven't any poor relations. I believe they are of great assistance in getting rid of superfluous capital. Wish I had some. It was after the legacy that women discovered my attractions. They found that there was something superb in my plainness, before they said ugliness, something after the style of the late Victor Emmanuel, something infinitely more striking than mere ordinary beauty. At least so Harding told me his sister said, and she had the reputation of being a clever girl. Being an only child, I never had the opportunity other fellows had of studying the undressed side of women through familiar intercourse, say with sisters. Their most ordinary belongings were sacred to me. I used to be told, ridiculous high-flown notions about them. By the way, I modified those considerably on closer acquaintance. I ought to study them, nothing like a woman for developing a fellow. So I laid in a stock of books in different languages, mostly novels, in which women played title roles, in order to get up some definite data before venturing amongst them. I can't say I derived much benefit from this course. There seemed to be as great a diversity of opinion about the female species as, let us say, about the Salmonidae. My friend Ponsonby Smith, who is one of the oldest fly fishers in the Three Kingdoms, said to me once, "Take my word for it, there are only 4 true Salmo, the Sala, the Trutter, the Fario, the Ferox, all the rest are just varieties, subgenuses of the above, stick to that." Some writing fellow divided all the women into good uns and bad uns. But as a conscientious stickler for truth, I must say that both in trout, as in women, I have found myself faced with most puzzling varieties, that were a tantalizing blending of several qualities. I then resolved to study them on my own account. I pursued the eternal feminine in a spirit of purely scientific investigation. I knew you'd laugh skeptically at that, but it's a fact. I was impartial in my selection of subjects for observation, French, German, Spanish, as well as the home product. Nothing in petticoats escaped me. I devoted myself to the freshest ingenue as well as the experienced widow of 3 departed, and I may as well confess that the more I saw of her, the less I understood her. But I think they understood me. They refused to take me au serio. When they weren't fleecing me, they were interested in the state of my soul. I preferred the former, but all humbugged me equally, so I gave them up. I took to rod and gun instead, pro salute anime. It's decidedly safer. I have scoured every country in the globe. Indeed, I can say that I have shot and fished in woods and waters where no other white man, perhaps, ever dropped a beast or played a fish before. There is no life like the life of a free wanderer, and no lore like the lore one gleans in the great book of nature. But one must have freed one's spirit from the taint of the town before one can even read the alphabet of its mystic meaning. What has this to do with the glove? True, not much, and yet it has a connection. It accounts for me. Well, for 12 years I have followed the impulses of the wandering spirit that dwells in me. I have seen the sun rise in Finland and gild the devil's knuckles as he sank behind the Drakensberg. I have caught the barber and the gamer yellow fish in the Vaal River, taken muskellunge and black bass in Canada, thrown a fly over guapote and cavallo in Central American lakes, and choked the monster eels of the Mauritius with a cunningly faked-up duckling. But I have been shy as a chub at the shadow of a woman. Well, it happened last year I came back on business. Another confounded legacy, end of June too, just as I was off to Finland. But Messrs. Thimble and Rigg, the highly respectable firm who look after my affairs, represented that I owed it to others, whom I kept out of their share of the legacy, to stay near town till affairs were wound up. They told me, with a view to reconcile me perhaps, of a trout stream with a decent inn near it, an unknown stream in Kent. It seems a junior member of the firm is an angler. At least he sometimes catches pike or perch in the Medway, some way from the stream where the trout rise in audacious security from artificial lures. I stipulated for a clerk to come down with any papers to be signed, and started at once for Victoria. I declined to tell the name of my find, firstly because the trout are the gamest little fish that ever rose to fly and run to a good £2. Secondly, I have paid for all the rooms in the inn for the next year, and I want it to myself. The glove is lying on the table next me as I write. If it isn't in my breast pocket or under my pillow, it is in some place where I can see it. It has a delicate grey body, sweady I think they call it, with a whipping of silver round the top, and a darker grey silk tag to fasten it. It is marked 5, 3, 4 inside, and has a delicious scent about it, to keep off moths, I suppose. Naphthalene is better. It reminds me of a silver sedge tied on a 10-hook. I startled the good landlady of the little inn, there is no village fortunately, when I arrived with the only porter of the tiny station laden with traps. She hesitated about a private sitting room, but eventually we compromised matters, as I was willing to share it with the other visitor. I got into knickerbockers at once, collared a boy to get me worms and minnow for the morrow, and as I felt too lazy to unpack tackle, just sat in the shiny armchair, made comfortable by the successive sitting of former occupants, at the open window and looked out. The river, not the trout stream, winds to the right, and the trees cast trembling shadows into its clear depths. The red tiles of a farm roof show between the beeches, and break the monotony of blue sky background. A dusty waggoner is slaking his thirst with a tankard of ale. I am conscious of the strange lonely feeling that a visit to England always gives me. Away in strange lands, even in solitary places, one doesn't feel it somehow. One is filled with the hunter's lust, bent on a kill. But at home in the quiet country, with the smoke curling up from some fireside, the mowers busy laying the hay in swaths, the children tumbling under the trees in the orchards, and a girl singing as she spreads the clothes on the sweetbriar hedge, amidst a scene quick with home sights and sounds, a strange lack creeps in, and makes itself felt in a dull, aching way. Oddly enough, too, I had a sense of uneasiness, a something going to happen. I had often experienced it when out alone in a great forest or on an unknown lake, and it always meant ware danger of some kind. But why should I feel it here? Yet I did, and I couldn't shake it off. I took to examining the room. It was a commonplace one of the usual type, but there was a work basket on the table, a dainty thing, lined with blue satin. There was a bit of lace stretched over shiny blue linen, with a needle sticking in it, such fairy work, like cobwebs seen from below, spun from a branch against a background of sky. A gold thimble, too, with initials, not the landlady's, I know. What pretty things, too, in the basket. A scissors, a capital shape for fly making, a little file, and some floss silk and tinsel. The identical colour I want for a new fly, I have in my head, one that will be a demon to kill. The northern devil, I mean to call him. Someone looks in behind me, and a light step passes upstairs. I drop the basket, I don't know why. There are some reviews near it. I take up one, and am soon buried in an article on Tasmanian fauna. It is strange, but whenever I do know anything about a subject, I always find these writing fellows either entirely ignorant or damned wrong. After supper, I took a stroll to see the river. It was a silver-grey evening, with just the last lemon and pink streaks of the sunset staining the sky. There had been a shower, and somehow the smell of the dust after rain mingled with the mignonette in the garden brought back vanished scenes of small boyhood, when I caught minnows in a bottle and dreamt of a shilling rod as happiness unattainable. I turned aside from the road in accordance with directions and walked towards the stream. "Halloa! Someone before me! What a bore!" The angler is hidden by an elder bush, but I can see the fly drop delicately, artistically on the water. Fishing upstream, too, there is a bit of broken water there, and the midges dance in myriads, a silver gleam, and the line spins out, and the fly falls just in the right place. It is growing dusk, but the fellow is an adept at quick, fine casting. I wonder what fly he has on. Why, he's going to try downstream now. I hurry forward, and as I near him, I swerve to the left out of the way. SSS. A sudden sting in the lobe of my ear. "Hey!" I cry as I find I am caught, the tail fly is fast in it. A slight, grey-clad woman holding the rod lays it carefully down and comes towards me through the gathering dusk. My first impulse is to snap the gut and take to my heels, but I am held by something less tangible, but far more powerful than the grip of the limerick hook in my ear. "I am very sorry," she says in a voice that matched the evening. It was so quiet and soft, but it was exceedingly stupid of you to come behind like that. "I didn't think you threw such a long line. I thought I was safe," I stammered. "Hold this," she says, giving me a diminutive fly book, out of which she has taken a scissors. I obey meekly. She snips the gut. "Have you a sharp knife? If I strip the hook, you can push it through. It is lucky it isn't in the cartilage." I suppose I am an awful idiot, but I only handed her the knife, and she proceeded as calmly as if stripping a hook in a man's ear were an everyday occurrence. Her gown is of some soft grey stuff, and her grey leather belt is silver-clasped. Her hands are soft and cool and steady, but there is a rarely disturbing thrill in their gentle touch. The thought flashed through my mind that I had just missed that. A woman's voluntary tender touch, not a paid caress, all my life. Now you can push it through yourself. I hope it won't hurt much. Taking the hook, I push it through, and a drop of blood follows it. "Oh!" she cries, but I assure her it is nothing, and stick the hook surreptitiously in my coat sleeve. And we both laugh, and I look at her for the first time. She has a very white forehead, with little tendrils of hair blowing round it under her grey cap. Her eyes are grey. I didn't see that then. I only saw they were steady, smiling eyes that matched her mouth. Such a mouth, the most maddening mouth a man ever longed to kiss, above a two-pointed chin, soft as a child's indeed. The whole face looks soft in the misty light. "I am sorry I spoilt your sport," I say. "Oh, that don't matter, it's time to stop. I got 2 brace, 1 a beauty." She is winding in her line, and I look in her basket. They are beauties, 1 2-pounder, the rest running from a half to a pound. "What fly?" "Yellow dun took that one, but your assailant was a partridge spider." I sling her basket over my shoulder, she takes it as a matter of course, and we retrace our steps. I feel curiously happy as we walk towards the road. There is a novel delight in her nearness. The feel of woman works subtly and strangely in me. The rustle of her skirt as it brushes the black heads in the meadow grass, and the delicate perfume, partly violets, partly herself, that comes to me with each of her movements, is a rare pleasure. I am hardly surprised when she turns into the garden of the inn. I think I knew from the first that she would. Better bathe that ear of yours and put a few drops of carbolic in the water. She takes the basket as she says it and goes into the kitchen. I hurry over this and go into the little sitting room. There is a tray with a glass of milk and some oaten cakes upon the table. I am too disturbed to sit down. I stand at the window and watch the bats flitter in the gathering moonlight and listen with quivering nerves for her step. Perhaps she will send for the tray and not come after all. What a fool I am to be disturbed by a grey-clad witch with a tantalizing mouth. That comes of loafing about doing nothing. I mentally darn the old fool who saved her money instead of spending it. Why the devil should I be bothered? I don't want it anyhow. She comes in as I fume, and I forget everything at her entrance. I push the armchair towards the table, and she sinks quietly into it, pulling the tray nearer. She has a wedding ring on, but somehow it never strikes me to wonder if she is married or a widow or who she may be. I am content to watch her break her biscuits. She has the prettiest hands, and a trick of separating her last fingers when she takes hold of anything. They remind me of white orchids I saw somewhere. She led me to talk about Africa, I think. I liked to watch her eyes glow deeply in the shadow, and then catch light as she bent forward to say something in her quick, responsive way. "Long ago when I was a girl," she said once. "Long ago?" I echo incredulously. "Surely not?" "Ah, but yes. You haven't seen me in the daylight," with a soft little laugh. "Do you know what the gypsies say? Never judge a woman or a ribbon by candlelight." They might have said moonlight equally well. She rises as she speaks, and I feel an overpowering wish to have her put out her hand. But she does not. She only takes the work-basket and a book, and says good night with an inclination of her little head. I go over and stand next to her chair. I don't like to sit in it, but I like to put my hand where her head leant, and fancy, if she were there, how she would look up. I woke next morning with a curious sense of pleasurable excitement. I whistled from very lightness of heart as I dressed. When I got down, I found the landlady clearing away her breakfast things. I felt disappointed and resolved to be down earlier in future. I didn't feel inclined to try the minnow. I put them in a tub in the yard and tried to read and listen for her step. I dined alone. The day dragged terribly. I did not like to ask about her. I had a notion she might not like it. I spent the evening on the river. I might have filled a good basket, but I let the beggars rest. After all, I had caught fish enough to stock all the rivers in Great Britain. There are other things than trout in the world. I sit and smoke a pipe where she caught me last night. If I half close my eyes, I can see hers and her mouth in the smoke. That is one of the curious charms of baccy. It helps to reproduce brain pictures. After a bit, I think perhaps she has left. I get quite feverish at the thought and hasten back. I must ask. I look up at the window as I pass. There is surely a gleam of white. I throw down my traps and hasten up. She is leaning with her arms on the window ledge, staring out into the gloom. I could swear I caught a suppressed sob as I entered. I cough, and she turns quickly and bows slightly. A bonnet and gloves and lace affair and a lot of papers are lying on the table. I am awfully afraid she is going. I say, "Please don't let me drive you away. It is so early yet. I half expected to see you on the river." "Nothing so pleasant. I have been up in town." The tears have certainly got into her voice all day. "It was so hot and dusty. I am tired out." The little servant brings in the lamp and a tray with a bottle of lemonade. "Mistress hasn't any lemons. Will this do?" "Yes," she says wearily. She is shading her eyes with her hand. "Anything. I am fearfully thirsty." "Let me concoct you a drink instead. I have lemons and ice and things. My man sent me down supplies today. I leave him in town. I am rather a dab at drinks. I learnt it from the Yankees. About the only thing I did learn from them I care to remember." "Susan?" The little maid helps me to get the materials, and she watches me quietly. When I give it to her, she takes it with a smile. She has been crying. "That is an ample thank you." She looks quite old. Something more than tiredness called up those lines in her face. Well, 10 days passed. Sometimes we met at breakfast, sometimes at supper. Sometimes we fished together or sat in the straggling orchard and talked. She neither avoided me nor sought me. She is the most charming mixture of child and woman I ever met. She is a dual creature. Now I never met that in a man. When she is here without getting a letter in the morning or going to town, she seemed like a girl. She runs about in her grey gown and little cap and laughs, and seems to throw off all thought like an irresponsible child. She is eager to fish or pick gooseberries and eat them daintily, or sit under the trees and talk. But when she goes to town, I notice she always goes when she gets a lawyer's letter. There is no mistaking the envelope. She comes home tired and haggard-looking, an old woman of 35. I wonder why. It takes her, even with her elasticity of temperament, nearly a day to get young again. I hate her to go to town. It is extraordinary how I miss her. I can't recall, when she is absent, her saying anything very wonderful, but she converses all the time. She has a gracious way of filling the place with herself. There is an entertaining quality in her very presence. We had one rainy afternoon. She tied me some flies. I shan't use any of them. I watched the lights in her hair as she moved. It is quite golden in some places, and she has a tiny mole near her left ear and another on her left wrist. On the 11th day she got a letter, but she didn't go to town. She stayed up in her room all day. 20 times I felt inclined to send her a line, but I had no excuse. I heard the landlady say as I passed the kitchen window, "Poor dear, I'm sorry to lose her." Lose her? I should think not. It has come to this with me that I don't care to face any future without her, and yet I know nothing about her, not even if she is a free woman. I shall find that out the next time I see her. In the evening, I catch a glimpse of her gown in the orchard, and I follow her. We sit down near the river. Her left hand is lying gloveless next to me in the grass. Do you think from what you have seen of me that I would ask a question out of any mere impertinent curiosity? She starts. No, I do not. I take up her hand and touch the ring. Tell me, does this bind you to anyone? I am conscious of a buzzing in my ears and a dancing blur of water and sky and trees as I wait, it seems to me an hour, for her reply. I felt the same sensation once before, when I got drawn into some rapids and had an awfully narrow shave, but of that another time. The voice is shaking. I am not legally bound to anyone, at least, but why do you ask? She looks me square in the face as she speaks, with a touch of haughtiness I never saw in her before. Perhaps the great relief I feel, the sense of joy at knowing she is free, speaks out of my face, for hers flushes, and she drops her eyes, her lips tremble. I don't look at her again, but I can see her all the same. After a while she says, "I half intended to tell you something about myself this evening. Now I must. Let us go in. I shall come down to the sitting room after your supper." She takes a long look at the river and the inn, as if fixing the place in her memory. It strikes me with a chill that there is a goodbye in her gaze. Her eyes rest on me a moment as they come back. There is a sad look in their grey clearness. She swings her little grey gloves in her hand as we walk back. I can hear her walking up and down overhead, how tired she will be, and how slowly the time goes. I am standing at one side of the window when she enters. She stands at the other, leaning her head against the shutter with her hands clasped before her. I can hear my own heart beating, and, I fancy, hers through the stillness. The suspense is fearful. At length she says, "You have been a long time out of England. You don't read the papers?" "No." A pause. I believe my heart is beating inside my head. "You asked me if I was a free woman. I don't pretend to misunderstand why you asked me. I am not a beautiful woman, I never was. But there must be something about me. There is in some women. Essential femininity, perhaps, that appeals to all men. What I read in your eyes I have seen in many men's before, but before God I never tried to rouse it. Today, with a sob, I can say I am free. Yesterday morning I could not. Yesterday my husband gained his case and divorced me." She closes her eyes and draws in her underlip to stop its quivering. I want to take her in my arms, but I am afraid to. "I did not ask you any more than if you were free." "No, but I am afraid you don't quite take in the meaning. I did not divorce my husband. He divorced me. He got a decree nisi. Do you understand now?" She is speaking with difficulty. "Do you know what that implies?" I can't stand her face any longer. I take her hands. They are icy cold, and hold them tightly. "Yes, I know what it implies. That is, I know the legal and social conclusion to be drawn from it, if that is what you mean. But I never asked you for that information." I have nothing to do with your past. You did not exist for me before the day we met on the river. I take you from that day and I ask you to marry me." I feel her tremble and her hands get suddenly warm. She turns her head and looks at me long and searchingly. Then she says, "Sit down, I want to say something." I obey, and she comes and stands next the chair. I can't help it. I reach up my arm, but she puts it gently down. "No, you must listen without touching me. I shall go back to the window. I don't want to influence you a bit by any personal magnetism I possess. I want you to listen. I have told you he divorced me. The co-respondent was an old friend, a friend of my childhood, of my girlhood. He died just after the first application was made, luckily for me. He would have considered my honour before my happiness. I did not defend the case. It wasn't likely. Ah, if you knew all. He proved his case, given clever counsel, willing witnesses to whom you make it worthwhile, and no defence. Divorce is always attainable, even in England. But remember, I figure as an adulteress in every English-speaking paper. If you buy last week's evening papers, do you remember the day I was in town? I nod. You will see a sketch of me in that days. Someone, perhaps he, must have given it. It was from an old photograph. I bought one at Victoria as I came out. It is funny, with an hysterical laugh, to buy a caricature of one's own poor face at a news stall. Yet in spite of that I have felt glad. The point for you is that I made no defence to the world, and, with a lifting of her head, I will make no apology, no explanation, no denial to you, now nor ever. I am very desolate, and your attention came very warm to me, but I don't love you. Perhaps I could learn to, with a rush of colour, for what you have said tonight, and it is because of that I tell you to weigh what this means. Later, when your care for me will grow into habit, you may chafe at my past. It is from that I would save you. I hold out my hands, and she comes and puts them aside, and takes me by the beard, and turns up my face and scans it earnestly. She must have been deceived a good deal. I let her do as she pleases. It is the wisest way with women, and it is good to have her touch me in that way. She seems satisfied. She stands leaning against the arm of the chair and says, "I must learn first to think of myself as a free woman again. It almost seems wrong today to talk like this. Can you understand that feeling?" I nod assent. "Next time I must be sure, and you must be sure." She lays her fingers on my mouth as I am about to protest. "Shh, you shall have a year to think. If you repeat then what you have said today, I shall give you your answer. You must not try to find me. I have money. If I am living, I will come here to you. If I am dead, you will be told of it. In the year between, I shall look upon myself as belonging to you and render an account, if you wish, of every hour. You will not be influenced by me in any way, and you will be able to reason it out calmly. If you think better of it, don't come. I feel there would be no use trying to move her. I simply kiss her hands and say, "As you will, dear woman, I shall be here." We don't say any more. She sits down on a footstool with her head against my knee, and I just smooth it. When the clocks strike 10 through the house, she rises, and I stand up. I see that she has been crying quietly, poor lonely little soul. I lift her off her feet and kiss her, and stammer out my sorrow at losing her, and she is gone. Next morning, the little maid brought me an envelope from the lady, who left by the first train. It held a little grey glove. That is why I carry it always, and why I haunt the inn and never leave it for longer than a week. Why I sit and dream in the old chair that has a ghost of her presence always. Dream of the spring to come with the mayfly on the wing, and the young summer when midges dance, and the trout are growing fastidious. When she will come to me across the meadow grass, through the silver haze as she did before, come with her grey eyes shining to exchange herself for her little grey glove. The Woman Beater by Israel Zangwill, The Grey Wig Stories and Novelettes, New York, The Macmillan Company, 1903. She came to meet John Lafolly, but John Lafolly did not know he was to meet Winifred Glamoris. He did not even know he was himself the meeting point of all the brilliant and beautiful persons assembled in the publisher's Saturday salon, for although a youthful minor poet, he was modest and lovable. Perhaps his Oxford tutorship was sobering. At any rate, his head remained unturned by his precocious fame, and to meet these other young men and women, his reverend seniors on the slopes of Parnassus, gave him more pleasure than the receipt of royalties. Not that his publisher afforded him much opportunity of contrasting the two pleasures. The profits of the muse went to provide this room of old furniture and roses, This beautiful garden, a twinkle with Japanese lanterns, like gorgeous fireflowers blossoming under the white crescent moon of early June. Winifred Glamoris was not literary herself. She was better than a poetess, she was a poem. The publisher always threw in a few realities, and some beautiful brainless creature would generally be found the nucleus of a crowd, while Cleo in spectacles languished in a corner. Winifred Glamoris, however, was reputed to have a tongue that matched her eye, paralleling with whimsies and epigrams its freakish fires and witcheries, and, assuredly, flitting in her white gown through the dark balmy garden, she seemed the very spirit of moonlight, the subtle incarnation of night and roses. When John Lefol met her, Cecilia was with her, and the first conversation was triangular. Cecilia fired most of the shots. She was a bouncing, rattling beauty, chock-full of confidence and high spirits, except when asked to do the one thing she could do, sing. Then she became, quite genuinely, a nervous, hesitant, pale little thing. However, the suppliant hostess bore her off, and presently her rich contralto notes passed through the garden, adding to its passion and mystery, and through the open French windows John could see her standing against the wall near the piano, her head thrown back, her eyes half closed, her creamy throat swelling in the very abandonment of artistic ecstasy. "What a charming creature!" he exclaimed involuntarily. "That is what everybody thinks except her husband," Winifred laughed. "Is he blind, then?" asked John with his cloistral naivete. "Blind? No, love is blind. Marriage is never blind." The bitterness in her tone pierced John. He felt vaguely the passing of some icy current from unknown seas of experience. Cecilia's voice soared out enchantingly. "Then marriage must be deaf," he said, "or such music as that would charm it." She smiled sadly. Her smile was the tricksy play of moonlight among clouds of faery. "You have never been married," she said simply. "Do you mean that you too are neglected?" Something impelled him to exclaim. "Worse," she murmured. "It is incredible," he cried. "You! Hush! My husband will hear you!" Her warning whisper brought him into a delicious conspiracy with her. "Which is your husband?" he whispered back. "There, near the casement, standing gazing open-mouthed at Cecilia. He always opens his mouth when she sings. It is like two toys moved by the same wire." He looked at the tall, stalwart, ruddy-haired Anglo-Saxon. "Do you mean to say he? I mean to say nothing." "But you said—" "I said worse." "Why, what can be worse?" She put her hand over her face. "I am ashamed to tell you." How adorable was that half-divined blush. "But you must tell me everything." He scarcely knew how he had leapt into this role of confessor. He only felt they were moved by the same wire. Her head drooped on her breast. "He beats me." "What?" John forgot to whisper. It was the greatest shock his recluse life had known, compact as it was of horror at the revelation, shamed confusion at her candour, and delicious pleasure in her confidence. This fragile, exquisite creature under the rod of a brutal bully. Once he had gone to a wedding reception, and among the serious presents some grinning Philistine drew his attention to an uncouth club, a wife-beater he called it. The flippancy had jarred upon John terribly, this intrusive reminder of the customs of the slums. It grated like Billingsgate in a boudoir. Now that savage weapon recurred to him, for a lurid instant he saw Winifred's husband wielding it. Oh, abomination of his sex! And did he stand there, in his immaculate evening dress, posing as an English gentleman? Even so might some gentleman burglar bear through a salon his imperturbable swallow-tail. Beat a woman. Beat that essence of charm and purity, God's best gift to man, redeeming him from his own grossness. Could such things be? John Lefol would as soon have credited the French legend that English wives are sold in Smithfield. No. It could not be real that this flower-like figure was thrashed. "Do you mean to say?" he cried. The rapidity of her confidence alone made him feel it all of a dream-like unreality. "Hush! Cecilia's singing," she admonished him with an unexpected smile as her fingers fell from her face. "Oh, you have been making fun of me." He was vastly relieved. "He beats you. At chess or at lawn tennis." Does one wear a high-necked dress to conceal the traces of chess or lawn tennis? He had not noticed her dress before, save for its spiritual whiteness. Susceptible though he was to beautiful shoulders, Winifred's enchanting face had been sufficiently distracting. Now the thought of physical bruises gave him a second spasm of righteous horror. That delicate rose-leaf flesh abraded and lacerated. The ruffian! Does he use a stick or a fist? Both, but as a rule he just takes me by the arms and shakes me like a terrier, a rat. I'm all black and blue now." "Poor butterfly," he murmured poetically. "Why did I tell you?" she murmured back with subtler poetry. The poet thrilled in every vein. Love at first sight, of which he had often read and often written, was then a reality. It could be as mutual, too, as Romeo's and Juliet's. But how awkward that Juliet should be married, and her husband a Bill Sikes in broadcloth. Mrs. Glamorys herself gave at-homes every Sunday afternoon, and so, on the morrow, after a sleepless night mitigated by perpended sonnets, the lovesick young tutor presented himself by invitation at the beautiful old house in Hampstead. He was enchanted to find his heart's mistress set in an 18th-century frame of small-paned windows and of high oak panelling, and at once began to image her dancing minuets and playing on virginals. Her husband was absent, but a broad band of velvet round Winifred's neck was a painful reminder of his possibilities. Winifred, however, said it was only a touch of sore throat caught in the garden. Her eyes added that there was nothing in the pathological dictionary which she would not willingly have caught for the sake of those divine, if draughty moments, but that, alas! It was more than a mere bodily ailment she had caught there. There were a great many visitors in the two delightfully quaint rooms, among whom he wandered, disconsolate and admired, jealous of her scattered smiles. But presently he found himself seated by her side on a cosy corner near the open folding doors, with all the other guests huddled round a violinist in the inner room. How Winifred had managed it he did not know, but she sat plausibly in the outer room, awaiting newcomers, and this particular niche was invisible, save to a determined eye. He took her unresisting hand, that dear warm hand with its begemmed artistic fingers, and held it in uneasy beatitude. How wonderful! She, the beautiful and adored hostess, of whose sweetness and charm he heard even her own guests murmur to one another. It was her actual flesh and blood hand that lay in his, thrillingly tangible. Oh, adventure beyond all merit, beyond all hoping. But every now and then, the outer door facing them would open on some newcomer, and John had hastily to release her soft magnetic fingers and sit demure, and jealously overhear her effusive welcome to those innocent intruders, nor did his brow clear till she had shepherded them within the inner fold. Fortunately, the refreshments were in this section, so that once therein, few of the sheep strayed back, and the jiggling wail of the violin was succeeded by a shrill babble of tongues and the clatter of cups and spoons. "Get me an ice, please, strawberry," she ordered John during one of these forced intervals in manual flirtation, and when he had steered laboriously to and fro, he found a young actor beside her in his cosy corner, and his jealous fancy almost saw their hands dispart. He stood over them with a sickly smile, while Winifred ate her ice. When he returned from depositing the empty saucer, the player fellow was gone, and in remorse for his mad suspicion, he stooped and reverently lifted her fragrant fingertips to his lips. The door behind his back opened abruptly. "Goodbye," she said, rising in a flash. The words had the calm, conventional cadence, and instantly extorted from him, amid all his dazedness, the corresponding goodbye. When he turned and saw it was Mr. Glamorys who had come in, his heart leapt wildly at the nearness of his escape. As he passed this masked ruffian, he nodded perfunctorily and received a cordial smile. Yes, he was handsome and fascinating enough externally, this blonde savage. A man may smile and be a villain, John thought. I wonder how he'd feel if he knew I knew he beats women. Already John had generalized the charge. "I hope Cecilia will keep him at arm's length," he had said to Winifred, "if only that she may not smart for it some day." He lingered purposely in the hall to get an impression of the brute, who had begun talking loudly to a friend with irritating bursts of laughter, speciously frank ringing. Golf, fishing, comic operas, the Boeotian. These were the men who monopolized the ethereal divinities, but this brusque separation from his particular divinity was disconcerting. How to see her again? He must go up to Oxford in the morning, he wrote her that night, but if she could possibly let him call during the week, he would manage to run down again. "Oh, my dear dreaming poet," she wrote to Oxford, "how could you possibly send me a letter to be laid on the breakfast table beside the Times, with a poem in it too? Fortunately, my husband was in a hurry to get down to the city, and he neglected to read my correspondence." "The unchivalrous blackguard," John commented. "But what can be expected of a woman beater? Never, never write to me again at the house. A letter, care of Mrs. Best, 8 Foley Street, WEC, will always find me. She is my maid's mother. And you must not come here either, my dear handsome head, in the clouds, except to my at-homes, and then only at judicious intervals. I shall be walking round the pond in Kensington Gardens at 4 next Wednesday, unless Mrs. Best brings me a letter to the contrary. And now, thank you for your delicious poem. I do not recognise my humble self in the dainty lines, but I shall always be proud to think I inspired them. Will it be in the new volume? I have never been in print before. It will be a novel sensation. I cannot pay you song for song, only feeling for feeling. Oh, John Lefol, why did we not meet when I had still my girlish dreams? Now I have grown to distrust all men, to fear the brute beneath the cavalier. Mrs. Best did bring her a letter, but it was not to cancel the appointment, only to say he was not surprised at her horror of the male sex, but that she must beware of false generalizations. Life was still a wonderful and beautiful thing, vid poem enclosed. He was counting the minutes till Wednesday afternoon. It was surely a popular mistake that only 60 went to the hour. This chronometrical reflection recurred to him even more poignantly in the hour that he circumambulated the pond in Kensington Gardens. Had she forgotten? Had her husband locked her up? What could have happened? It seemed 600 minutes, ere at 5:10 she came tripping daintily towards him. His brain had been reduced to insanely devising problems for his pupils. If a man walks 2 strides of 1.5 feet a second round, a lake 50 acres in area, in how many turns will he overtake a lady who walks half as fast and isn't there? But the moment her pink parasol loomed on the horizon, all his long misery vanished in an ineffable peace and uplifting. He hurried, bare-headed, to clasp her little gloved hand. He had forgotten her unpunctuality, nor did she remind him of it. "How sweet of you to come all that way," was all she said, and it was a sufficient reward for the hours in the train and the 600 minutes among the nursemaids and perambulators. The elms were in their glory, the birds were singing briskly, the water sparkled, the sunlit sward stretched fresh and green. It was the loveliest, coolest moment of the afternoon. John instinctively turned down a leafy avenue. Nature and love, what more could poet ask? "No, we can't have tea by the kiosk," Mrs. Glamoris protested. "Of course I love anything that savours of Paris, but it's become so fashionable. There will be heaps of people who know me. I suppose you've forgotten it's the height of the season." "I know a quiet little place in the High Street." She led him, unresisting but bemused, towards the gate and into a confectioner's. Conversation languished on the way. "Tea," he was about to instruct the pretty attendant. "Strawberry ices," Mrs. Glamoris remarked gently. "And some of those nice French cakes." The ice restored his spirits. It was really delicious, and he had got so hot and tired, pacing round the pond. Decidedly Winifred was a practical person, and he was a dreamer. The pastry he dared not touch, being a genius, but he was charmed at the gaiety with which Winifred crammed cake after cake into her rosebud of a mouth. What an enchanting creature! How bravely she covered up her life's tragedy! The thought made him glance at her velvet band. It was broader than ever. "He has beaten you again," he murmured furiously. Her joyous eyes saddened, she hung her head, and her fingers crumbled the cake. "What is his pretext?" he asked, his blood burning. "Jealousy," she whispered. His blood lost its glow, ran cold. He felt the bully's blows on his own skin, his romance turning suddenly sordid. But he recovered his courage. He, too, had muscles. "But I thought he just missed seeing me kiss your hand." She opened her eyes wide. "It wasn't you, you darling old dreamer." He was relieved and disturbed in one. "Somebody else?" he murmured. Somehow the vision of the player fellow came up. She nodded. "Isn't it lucky he has himself drawn a red herring across the track? I didn't mind his blows. You were safe." Then, with one of her adorable transitions, "I am dreaming of another ice," she cried with roguish wistfulness. "I was afraid to confess my own greediness," he said, laughing. He beckoned the waitress. "2 more. We haven't got any more strawberries," was her unexpected reply. "There's been such a run on them today." Winifred's face grew overcast. "Oh, nonsense," she pouted. To John the moment seemed tragic. "Won't you have another kind?" he queried. He himself liked any kind, but he could scarcely eat a second ice without her. Winifred meditated. "Coffee?" she queried. The waitress went away and returned with a face as gloomy as Winifred's. "It's been such a hot day," she said deprecatingly. "There is only one ice in the place, and that's Neapolitan." "Well, bring 2 Neapolitans," John ventured. "I mean, there is only 1 Neapolitan ice left." "Well, bring that. I don't really want one." He watched Mrs. Glamorys daintily, devouring the solitary ice, and felt a certain pathos about the parti-coloured oblong, as something of the haunting sadness of the last rose of summer. It would make a graceful, serio-comic triolet, he was thinking. But at the last spoonful, his beautiful companion dislocated his rhymes by her sudden upspringing. "Goodness gracious," she cried, "how late it is! Oh, you're not leaving me yet," he said. A world of things sprang to his brain, things that he was going to say, to arrange. They had said nothing, not a word of their love even, nothing but cakes and ices. "Poet," she laughed. "Have you forgotten I live at Hampstead?" She picked up her parasol. "Put me into a hansom, or my husband will be raving at his lonely dinner table." He was so dazed as to be surprised when the waitress blocked his departure with a bill. When Winifred was spirited away, he remembered she might, without much risk, have given him a lift to Paddington. He hailed another hansom and caught the next train to Oxford. But he was too late for his own dinner in Hall.